thing, and they had some really fancy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we did one with a clock, and we stuffed chicken wire and made, I think we were playing the Pioneer, so they had a Pioneer guy with a thing hanging down. But no, we used to decorate the fraternity house, and there'd be a mob of cars driving around to look at it, and that's 1960.
I remember when the Phi Gams put a bull out in their front yard and left it there for the week of homecoming. It didn't go over very well with the administration.
A bull?
A bull.
Ugh.
A bull.
Very interesting.
There I am.
Julianne, what about you? I think I saw that you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to mention that. Yeah, they were doing floats when I was there at Wittenberg, and I know when my daughter was there, I thought they did floats then. I could be wrong.
That's a fun thing. The ingenuity. I can only imagine how creative some of them got.
Yeah, Rebecca, those displays used to be from the rooftop to the ground on a lot of the fraternity and sorority houses. I mean, they were huge. And generally speaking, if you were a fraternity, there was something in your display that moved. And
yeah,
as I recall, it was the Delta Sigs of recent memory. The Delta Sig house had a display where it was a football player made out of chicken wire with the ball up over his shoulder, and he pivoted. But generally speaking, the sororities had displays where the chicken wire was wired to the roof and down to the ground. So that was about 2 stories. And when I was 7, I think, I started stuffing chicken wire tissue paper squares into the chicken wire at the Delta Zeta house.
Oh my God.
Yep.
And did that every year that I was a kid. But they were elaborate and gorgeous. And yeah, a parade of cars would go by, and it was go see the Christmas lights at Wittenberg all through the fall.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, those. I was an ATO, and we lived in the Polis House, which is now the International Dorm, and our year we had the whole front of the house covered with chicken wire from the top to the bottom and all the way across the full breadth of the house. And we had a clock playing the syncopated clock deal, and at the top of the clock was doors that opened out, and it was I forget, an image of a person, a standing person would come out, and the theme was who would win the game, and this person would come out and point to Wittenberg as going to be the victor. And
You ever give me back signed will, and I've got some statement of trust.
Craig, was Mrs. Wagner your house mother at the time?
she was, yes.
She used to feed me sugar cookies like there was no tomorrow.
Wow.
My mother was
I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised because I was thinking I'd be the only old person on this call. And it turns out,
I remember the ATOs having a Flush the Johns.
Yes.
That was I was there at the same time you were.
Go ahead.
I remember those too. I was there at the same time. So there are 3 of us.
well, Dave Wise is also on the phone right now, or on the call.
There are 4 of us.
He actually is on the phone also. I can see him on.
I'm doing a video conference here. Now they're making fun of me. But anyway, what you can do is put it in your name, and then we file an affidavit transfer on death. So if you would die, it would go to him then. You don't even have it in the trust. But some things to discuss about, and then the purchase agreement. We can. I've got one I can ship you.
All right, well, we're just gonna give it another couple of minutes and let everybody get in the room.
I know, very annoying.
Well, it seems like your bill is nothing.
All right. Has anybody got plans to attend any other events this weekend? Any other of our virtual events?
The toast.
The toast, absolutely. Everybody has to join the toast tonight. It's going to be amazing.
The
I'm
toast.
gonna listen to the coaches this afternoon.
Awesome. Well, I'll be seeing you there right after this then.
And I think Dr. Baker has one tomorrow morning.
Yep.
I'm going to be in on that one too.
That was a big attendance. I think that's a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that as well. All right, Tracy, I'm glad to see that you got in. All righty, well, I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me or haven't seen me in another room yet, my name is Rebecca Hart, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations. I'm also a 2014 WIT grad, so Tiger through and through. I'm really excited to be here all together in the Zoom room and that we're still making opportunities to connect. Today, I'm really excited because we've got an awesome presentation by our alumni, Chenelle Jones. She's a PhD. She's the Assistant Dean of Community Engagement at Franklin University. Chenelle also serves as the Chair of Public Safety Programs. Dr. Jones received her PhD in the Administration of Justice from Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. So I see we have Zara from Houston, so we've got some Houston fans in here. Her research interests include race and crime, policing, and juvenile delinquency. She is particularly interested in issues of police and community relations, mass incarceration, and the intersection of race and gender in the criminal justice system. So, admitting. At this point, I'm going to let Chenelle kind of take it over. And again, thank you so much, Chenelle, for taking the time to do this today. And just so everyone knows, I'm going to mute everybody as well, and then we'll have some time at the end for any kind of questions. And we can also always use the chat bar function.
Rebecca, before you do that, this is Janet Jackson from Columbus, Ohio. I just want to share with you that I had the incredible pleasure of working with Dr. Jones here in Columbus from March of 18 until I'll say officially January of 20. I was appointed by our mayor to chair this thing called the Safety Advisory Commission. It was our responsibility to review everything about the police department, not to investigate them, but just to review, their work and their training, and then to make recommendations to the mayor as to how the department could be improved. And so we made 80 recommendations to the mayor in January. Many of them are being implemented, but I will tell you, Dr. Jones was the shining star on the commission, and we've since become friends.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Janet, for that insight too.
So I thank you for this invitation, and Janet for the kind words. Let me tell you all about the Honorable Janet Jackson that we have on here. She is phenomenal, and I actually am going to mention her a little bit when we get into our talk, specifically about dominoes, and I'll make the connection eventually. But she, you know, is groundbreaking. First Black woman on the on the municipal court in Franklin County. And she's, you know, CEO, she's retired of the United Way. She's done incredible things. And like she said, she was recently appointed to the to chair the Safety Commission. And under her leadership, we did some great things and made some awesome recommendations for the Columbus Division of Police. So thank you. And she invited me last year to come to homecoming for the anniversary of the walkout, which I did, which it was good to see campus and all the foliage. It looked really nice. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and it looks like you have sharing disabled, so I need to share my screen. So if you can allow that, and then I will share my screen and we will get into this talk. And while she's working on that, like she mentioned, I'm assistant dean over at Franklin University. We do a lot of cool things over there. And I'm curious to know how everybody at Wittenberg has been adjusting to this remote environment, or, you know, are you all doing hybrid, or I wonder what they're doing. Okay, it looks like you got it to work. All right, so you all should see my screen. I'm going to go into presentation mode here, which we have. And so you all should be able to see that by now. Everybody do a thumbs up in the chat box or something, make sure we can do it. Cool. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about and spend a little bit of time talking about today is what I've been doing several talks virtually across the country, if that makes any sense, in this season. And that is about anti-racism, the pandemic, and pedagogy and andragogy, and how this is all intertwined, and how we can move the needle of justice forward. And so I'm going to give a little bit of an overview about the climate of the country, how we got to where we are, and then some steps in terms of moving forward. And so, you know, the chat box is open, so make sure you have questions, comments, you know, feel free to talk. I like things to be interactive. I like feedback. I'll answer your questions as we go along, but let's get into this right now. So this is what we're gonna do, and then at the end of this, we're definitely gonna have some Q&A. So first thing I want to talk a little bit about here is the climate of our country. As many of you remember, in March, we had the year of March. We thought we would not still be in this pandemic. We thought we would all be back to normal. You all remember when they were saying we would be back to normal by Easter, and then Easter never happened. We just kind of skirted past that holiday. Then we got into the decade of, you know, the spring, and we started to move towards summer. So we had the decade of April because it felt like forever. Then we had the century of May because that was even forever. I don't know if you all remember June, July, August, September, and because I don't know, it's all like a blur at this point. And that's what gets us here to October. So I just put all of that up in an error. But to just recap of some of the things that have taken place, we had the pandemic around February, the beginning of March. We, in the state of Ohio, we actually had the stay at home order issued on March the 23rd. Then we had my county, Franklin County, they made this declaration that racism is a public health issue. And so that got everybody starting to think about racism and equity and discrimination and what can we do about this, not just in healthcare, but in other sectors of people's lives. Then I don't even know if you all remember, but then soon after we get racism declared a public health issue, we had this video surface. And this video was of a young African-American man, he was a Black man, and he was running through a neighborhood. And a truck pulls up to him, and they end up shooting this guy dead. That was Ahmaud Auburn. That was all over the news. Then in the midst of all of that, we started to hear about this situation involving Breonna Taylor. And what we knew was that she was asleep in her bed, she was shot, and there was no arrest or anything that was taking place. That was all still a big deal as well. At the same time, in Ohio, the unemployment rate was soaring. We had tons of people filing for unemployment. It was increasingly getting to record high numbers. In the midst of all of this, we also had another video that surfaced, and that was in New York City in Central Park. There was a Black man who was doing some bird watching. And while he was bird watching, there was a white woman, and she had her dog in an area called, I believe, the Ramble, and her dog was just running amok. And so he says, you know, can you put your dog on a leash? Because there's signs over there that says dogs are supposed to be on a leash in this area. And instead of putting the dog on the leash, what did she do? She called the cops on the Black man, and she said, I'm going to tell them that you are threatening me, and he recorded the entire thing. So we all saw that video. Then we get to May 25th. I'm not sure if you all know what happened on May 25th, but on May 25th, that is the day that George Floyd was murdered. That then sparked a series of protests and demonstrations across the country. And when we move even past the summertime, recently to just a few days ago, we found out that there was no indictment for Breonna Taylor, for any of the officers involved. And I don't know if you all have had a chance to actually look at the case that was presented before the grand jury, but the case was not to actually even indict the officers for the murder of Breonna Taylor. The case that was presented was to indict the officers for shooting into the house of her neighbor. And so here we are with all of this going on in the midst of a pandemic, and everybody feeling all kinds of different ways, right? We have a couple of images that I've captured of things that have taken place over the summer. If you see in the first picture, that's Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, that's Franklin County Commissioner Kevin Boyce, and that's Columbus City Council President Shannon Hart. And that's when they were sprayed with pepper spray and mace by the Columbus Division of Police. You see the picture in the middle, that is our State House. People painted their hands red, and they put red fingerprints all over the State House as a sign of protest. Then we saw, deployed across several cities, the National Guard. And so that's an image there. We saw buildings that were being destroyed. We saw people who were angry, people who felt like they weren't being heard, all in an uproar. And I don't know if the response would have been what it was had not we been in a global pandemic in a stay-at-home order. But this is signs that people have finally reached a tipping point and wanted something to be done, because it was no longer just, hey, we need to fix one or two things in the criminal justice system. What people saw was systemic racism throughout various stages of not just the criminal justice system, but their social lives and whatnot. And a lot of people had a ton of different emotions. I don't know if you can relate to this, but you had some people that were saying, we are just tired of having to explain ourselves, tired of the protests. We had some people that say, you know, I'm proud of these peaceful protests, but I really don't like the violent protests, and these make me sad. We had some people that want to support police officers, and then you had other people who were just blatantly outraged by police brutality. You had some people that wanted to be open-minded, but at the same time, they were frustrated. You had people saying, Black Lives Matter, and then you had some other groups saying, well, I think all lives matter, not realizing that all lives truly don't matter until you can make sure that Black Lives Matters is all intertwined. So you had these dueling emotions and thoughts running through people's mind. You had people say, well, we don't like racism, we want to do something about it. I'm not quite sure what to do, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I want to go downtown and protest, because hello, we're still in the midst of a global pandemic. So what should we do? You have people dealing with all of these emotions. They're thinking about it. They're questioning, what can I do? What can I do? I want to do something, you know, I want to advocate. I want my voice to be heard, but I'm not sure where to start. And that's where I tell everybody, just pause. do what the wonderful Honorable Janet Jackson did. Just take a drink. Sometimes you just have to pause, because oftentimes when we operate off of high emotion without thinking things through, we can oftentimes make rash decisions that may do more harm than they actually do good. So I always tell people, pause. And so while all that's going through your mind, I want you all to just pause. And I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about myself. This is me. You all see? The wonderful baby Dr. Chenelle Jones. This is when I was young and had no cares in the world. And who would have thought she would have grown up to be an assistant dean and, I don't know, embark on her trajectory of changing the world. I don't know. But that is Dr. Jones before she was Dr. Jones. And I always have this picture. I love this picture because my mom likes to put me in little Oshkosh B'gosh, those little jumpsuits. I don't know why. And she always put 2 pigtails in my head. I mean, it was just all the way up through elementary school. But one of the things that she always let me know, and she always instilled in me and reminded me, was that I was not an average child. She always referred to me as a domino. And I don't know if you all know anything about dominoes. Dominoes are people, here's the thing, dominoes spark change. If you tip one domino after you have several dominoes lined up, the entire row of dominoes will eventually fall. And the beautiful thing about dominoes is, you know, metaphorically, it's great. I don't know if you all played dominoes before or tried to sift them up, you know, and knock them over. That's good. Everybody has a domino inside of them. And so I am going to challenge everybody as I continue to go through this presentation to tap into your own inner domino and to start thinking about it. So when I talk about the domino, I talk about the people who are not afraid to speak up. And when you see something that is not right, that you say something. Dominoes tend to be the first person to do something, because what happens is when they go through a door, they leave that door open for other people to follow in their footsteps. And that's why I mentioned the Honorable Janet Jackson on the call here. When she became the first Black woman appointed to the municipal court, she was elected, what she did was open the door for other Black women to sit in that seat after her. And so dominoes are change agents. They are groundbreakers, they are movers, they are shakers. They operate within their area of expertise and their passion, and they do great things. But not only do they do great things, but they have a line of people behind them that they open up that door, and they change basically the trajectory of their lives as well. So when I think about the domino, a couple of things, you know, when I was, you know, in elementary, middle, and high school, I played every sport that you could possibly think of. My mom and dad made sure that I was involved. But then I went on to Wittenberg. At Wittenberg University, I was the first person in my immediate family to graduate with a bachelor's degree. My mom eventually went back, but she went back after I had finished my bachelor's degree. But not only after I finished, but after my brother finished and my sister finished. Then she focused on herself and got her degree. But I was the first person in my immediate family to get a bachelor's degree. Then I went on to the University of Dayton and I got my master's degree. But the big degree that you see in that picture in the back, that's from Texas Southern University. That's my PhD. And the interesting thing about the PhD is because when I went to Houston, number one, I didn't know anybody. That was a leap of faith move. So dominoes do that. We just take leap of faith. We don't got a plan. I didn't have an apartment. I didn't know where I was going to stay. All I know is I was accepted into this university. I was like, I'm going. Everything else fell into place. But anyway, so I get to TSU, and I will never forget the first day of class. I'm sitting, getting ready to go into a class, and a young man comes and he approaches me, and his name is Myron. I don't know if you all know any Myrons in your lives, but this Myron got on my nerves. And so Myron came up to me, and Myron said, you know, I've been in this program for quite some time. And he was like, you know, and a lot of people have tried to get in this program, this criminal justice program, the administration of justice program. They're like, you know, we've been doing this for quite some time and none of us have graduated yet. So Myron had the nerve to look at me and he says, you know, we haven't been successful here. It was like, I don't think you're going to be successful either. Because, you know, most doctoral programs are scheduled or are structured to weed people out. And so I looked at Myron and I said, well, you know, you try to tell me what I can do, and how about I show you what I can do? And I have that up there because the domino in me. I ended up being the first person to graduate with a PhD in the administration of justice from Texas Southern University. Not only was I the first person to graduate from that program, but I also did it in 2.5 years. That is a domino. That you then do it, you show somebody it's possible, it's not as hard as they say, and then you inspire an entire generation to want to do the same thing. And so that's the domino in me. When I think about dominoes, I think about this random day when I just decided to buy a motorcycle. It's a Riker, it's three-wheel motorcycle, whatever. And I just, you know, taking on rides. When I think about dominoes, I think about that bottom picture right there. We wanted to create a series of dinner parties specifically for Black women. There was none anywhere in the city of Columbus. So me and my sister got together. We created one. We called it a seat at our table. We invited 50 of the most influential young professional Black women in the city of Columbus together over dinner. And we brought in some of the top executives from BET networks to actually just share and have an intimate conversation with them. That's the domino. And this big picture that you see right here on the screen is another, probably one of my most proudest domino moves. This was over the summer on June 14th. As many of you know, there were several different protests, demonstrations going on across the country. And when we went down there, we started hearing feedback from Black women saying, well, when I go to a protest, I feel like I'm an outsider at a protest that's supposed to be advocating for Black lives. And we kept hearing this over and over and over and over again. And I started to think about the demonstrations that took place across the country. And I had not seen one that was specifically led, organized, and designated for Black women. So what did I do? I organized one. And we had probably the largest demonstration in the city of Columbus take place at City Hall. And it was a move of solidarity and unity with Black women standing up for Black lives. That is a domino. It didn't happen. It never existed. So, hey, we moved to create it. So when we think about the domino, I like to think of it as this. One person, that's me, that's you listening to this presentation, that's your colleagues, that's your coworkers, it's anybody that you know doing one simple act. That act could be calling somebody, that act could be writing a letter to your senator, that act could be opening a door, that act could be becoming the first person of your age, race, gender, or something to do something, but doing that one thing to spark change. When I think about the domino effect, sometimes doing that one act requires us to take bold moves, and it requires us to take courageous moves. And we can do that too. Here's another one. When I was in Houston working on my PhD, I partnered with a couple of professors out of the University of Houston Clear Lake, Dr. Everett Penn, and then the Assistant Chief of Police from Houston Police Department. And we started this program called TAPS. It's the Teen and Police Service Academy. We started that program, and what that program does is it pairs police officers up with kids, and the officers serve as mentors to the kids over an 11-week period, and then they follow up with them afterwards. How did this all get started? The domino. We noticed that there was contention between police and the community, particularly between police and students of color. And so what did we do? We decided to do something about it. So we launched that program in Houston. Then we eventually launched one in the city of Columbus. Then we launched one in Galveston. Then we launched one in Tampa. Then we launched one in Chicago. Then we decided, hey, why not go abroad into some hot places in the Caribbean? So we went to St. Kitts and launched the TAPS program there. Then we went to Barbados and launched the TAPS approach. And so now we literally have TAPS academies across cities, in cities across the country, including even Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And so what do you see in these pictures? These pictures are actual TAPS sessions that take place. Kids have a lesson, they learn from the officers, but sometimes you have to deviate from what has been in the curriculum for a particular time. And I'll give you an example. There's a picture here at the bottom screen, and it's a little boy that's hugging a dog. This was one of the first TAP sessions that we had a couple of years ago. And we usually on the first day, we have an intro, we have the kids learn about TAPs and do all these things. But on that particular day, before the school started, a kid was murdered. A teenager who attended the school was murdered. And so instead of doing the basic TAPS curriculum that we adhere to, what we asked the K-9 unit to come in, and we asked them to bring in the little, the specialty dogs and whatnot. And they brought in the dogs, and they had a discussion about violence in the community. And it was healing. Many of those kids, they had just lost their friend. They were having a really difficult time. And so we brought them in. But here's the thing, we just started TAPS for this session in Columbus on Tuesday of this week. And so we were meeting with some of the officers, and we were doing a TAP session. The Domino also requires crucial conversations, and sometimes it requires us to speak up. And during the TAP session, we're used to doing them all face-to-face, as you can see right here. Well, now we're in a virtual environment. Columbus City Schools, they're all virtual. So we had to change and shift, pivot, I like to call it, to doing TAPs in a virtual environment. So in the midst of doing the virtual TAPs, one of the officers was facilitating the lesson. And the kids who were on the call had their cameras cut off, similar to how some of us have our cameras cut off today. And so the officer started to get upset at the kids for having their cameras cut off. I mean, to the point where this officer was like, I need to see you, I need to see your face, cut the cameras on, yada, yada, yada. So I nicely had to step in, put my educator hat on and step in and tell him to mute his computer really quick so I can just have a one-off conversation with him and all the other officers in the room. And I said, we don't know what these kids are going through. We don't know what their home environments look like. We don't know who may be in the room. We don't know what clothes they have on or don't have on. I said, so the best thing you can possibly do in this moment is demonstrate grace and compassion. And instead of trying to force them to meet you where you are because you have your camera on, let's meet them where they are. Let's go into the chat box. Let's say hello in the chat box. Let's ask them how they're doing in the chat box. And then before you know it, the officers, hesitant, but they did it. They ended up doing an entire lecture that was engaging, that was informative, that got all the kids talking in the chat box. Still attendance, we still had good participation. It was just a matter of pivoting the way that the officers did it. And that is what Dominoes do. They speak up, they have those uncomfortable conversations, but they also cause other people to maybe shift the way that they think and they do things. So when we think about the domino, and as I'm encouraging you all to tap into your inner domino, there are 4 things that I always implore people to do: recognize, reflect, respond, remain committed to learning. Especially in this climate where we're dealing with heightened awareness of racism, heightened awareness of discrimination. People are being challenged to explore their own biases, unconscious and explicit. And what I need everybody to do is think about all of this. And it starts with recognizing that there is an issue. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think the news headlines and, us constantly being bombarded with information regarding the state of our country and race relations, we know that there is definitely a problem. All right, Houston, we have a problem. Now, what do? You start to reflect. The first thing, instead of, going off and wanting to change the world, I encourage everybody to assess where you are, where your headspace is. How have your experiences shaped where you are in life? Think about, when we talk about pedagogy and anti-racism, think about your teachers. Did you go to school and all of your teachers looked like you? Or did you go to school and your teachers primarily did not look like you? Think about the books that you read. when you had tests, did they give examples of people who reflected your race and your age, or people who were different from you? Think about the opportunities that were afforded to you, or some of the challenges that you had to encounter while you navigated life. You know, one of the things we know is definitely real is name discrimination, you know? So, you know, were you able to just get on that job application? Did you have to send your application in a couple of times to different places simply because you had an ethnic sounding name that people automatically just threw out? Because studies have shown that that has happened. And so when we think about that, I always encourage people to do two things. One is take the Harvard Implicit Association test, but don't take it one time. Everybody likes to take it one time and say, oh, my results are blah, 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 and then they're freaking out. Take it over and over and over and over and over again. The Harvard Implicit Association test shows that the results are most reliable when you use the aggregate results, not just one. So if you take one, it's probably not reflective. But if you take a couple, it is. But the other thing that I encourage people to do is when they don't have that Harvard Implicit Association test, is I challenge them to do something. You can all do this. I'll walk you through this little exercise. If you have a piece of paper, write down who's in your circle. The initials, just write down the names of the people who are in your circle. And as you go through them, remember, the people who are in your trusted circle, that's not your family. Your family is something else. But if you think about who's in your circle, you write those initials down. And then you go through this little exercise. You put a check mark next to the people who are the same race as you. You put a check mark next to the people who are the same age as you. You put a check mark next to the people who have the same marital status as you. You put a check mark next to the people, if you're employed, they share employment status that is similar to you. You put a check mark next to the people who are within 5 miles of your living home, your home, wherever your residence is. And you put a check mark next to the people if they share the same religion as you. Then you go through that list and you start to think about it and see how many check marks that you have found. And if most of those check marks, if you got a majority of people with a majority of check marks, then that means that there is an opportunity for you to shift up and change and add or remove some people from that trusted circle so you can diversify it. That indicates an area of opportunity. There's a couple of definitions that I have on here. Moving from racism to anti-racism. And you know, in the midst of all of this, what we get is a lot of people that would say, you know, I'm not racist, I have a white friend, or, you know, whatever people say. But the reality is simply saying I'm not racist is not enough. There is a continuum, and we want people to not simply be an ally. We don't want people to not simply be not racist. What we want people to do is be anti-racist. Because when you're anti-racist, you're making an active and conscious effort to work against racism. And there's a difference in how that is done. But it all starts with reflecting on where you currently stand. And so this is a little bit more about, you know, being that domino, because it's, does somebody unmute themselves? But this is more about the domino and what the domino can do. Because oftentimes it's learning, it's attending these kind of talks, but it's often in those conversations, those one-on-ones, those having the dialogue with your family and your close friends, when something is said and you challenge that, hey, why would you say that? You know, what did you mean by that? And you can do it subtly. Those are domino moves, and everybody has the power to do it. I took this quote from Ibram Kendi, and I don't know if you've read his book, but he has a couple about anti-racism and Stand From the Beginning. They're both good, so those are good resources for you to read. Then, so you have the recognize there is an issue, reflect on where you are, and then after you had a moment to reflect, then you should be able to build some kind of capacity to respond. That's when you start confronting the racist ideas. That's where you start championing anti-racist notions and policies. And here's the other reality, tough reality of the situation is that racism is not a Black people problem. Oftentimes people want to go and hire a diversity inclusion expert and they want to, you know, do a panel discussion with a bunch of Black people on there. Let me tell you, racial battle fatigue is real. And that is not a tangible solution to addressing the issue. That requires self-reflection, reading, and white people and other different groups that harbor racist thoughts have amongst themselves to address. It's not a Black people problem. And then the other part of responding is assessing where you are. When we think about anti-racism, that's being active. There's no way of being passively anti-racist. Either you're anti-racist or you're not. You know, you're learning, you're challenging beliefs, you're interrupting racist behaviors, or you're going to workshops, you're learning. And then there's active racism and passive racism. And I want to talk a little bit about that because the notion that a lot of people have, the tendency that people do is, you know, we think racism is burning a cross in the middle of a field, or outwardly calling somebody a racial epithet or a slur, or committing a hate crime. You don't see that type of racism happen frequently, as often as you do today, as you would have, let's say, in the Jim Crow era, you know, or the antebellum period, or things like that. Racism today is more subtle, it's more systemic, it's more hidden. And so you have to be in tune to recognize the nuances of those behaviors. I'll give you an example. In Pickerington City Schools right now, there's an issue going on. There were two administrators. There was an assistant principal who was getting ready to be promoted to a principal, who was a Black woman. And then there was a white woman who was a principal. Both of them on their social media accounts, they posted things, racially inflammatory posting. One of them, the Black assistant principal, posted a picture of her daughter sitting next to a picture that had a derogatory statement about the police officers. And then the white principal had made several posts about Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Black people, things in general. There were racial slurs and whatnot that she had posted. This is passive racism. The Black administrator was demoted. So she was getting ready to be promoted to a principal and she lost that opportunity. She was demoted. She was made to stay an assistant principal. The white principal just received a warning. Same behavior, same social media platforms, same type of inflammatory comments, different penalties. It's passive racism. That's systemic racism. And so when we think about subtly how this happens, and it also happens in the classroom, when students are heard or they're not heard and they're graded differently, all of that is subtle racism. So how do you respond? I always encourage people to lead with empathy, to speak up, and to listen, and to particularly speak up in non-Black spaces. You know, privilege affords certain people, groups, demographics, the opportunity to be in rooms and environments where they can speak up and they can advocate on behalf of those who are not there. You have a voice. I implore and encourage everybody to use it. I also, you know, encourage people, you know, we're in the midst of an election, so, you know, register to vote, support voter rights. There are several different campaigns that people can, you know, contribute to. These are different ways that you can respond if you prefer to respond with your money. And then the other is economic power, you know, support Black-owned businesses and whatnot. But the biggest ones that I would say is the leading with empathy in all that you do. Listening to people who look like you, but also who do not look like you, and speaking up in those non-Black spaces. And if, you know, you all are, you know, interested in starting your own, you know, trajectory into anti-racism, there is this cool racial equity challenge that I always challenge people and encourage them to do. It's 21 days of reading, listening, watching, reflecting, connecting, and there's several different activities, and you work through each of the activities to get you to start thinking about new things and doing new things, meeting new people. I will say I gave a lecture at Franklin University, and I encouraged the staff, our administrative staff, to do this as well. And you would be surprised at the self-reflection and the aha moments that many of them have had just simply by starting here. So I encourage you to do that. And if the racial equity challenge is something, you know, not too much interested, I would encourage you to do this. You know, you can read some books, watch some movies, a couple of good books. Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? That's by Beverly Daniel Tatum. I already talked about Ibram Kendi. I don't know if you're familiar with Brian Stevenson. He's done some remarkable work in the racial justice space, particularly with people who are on death row and getting them exonerated. The New Jim Crow, that is by Michelle Alexander. She resides right here in Ohio. And she really wrote this groundbreaking book on understanding systemic racism in the criminal justice system. And then I also have some movies. 13th is a good one. I Am Not Your Negro, Selma, Just Mercy. American Son talks about, or American Violet is a movie about a drug raid that took place in Texas. It's based on a true story, Who Streets. And then if I were to recommend a documentary to watch, When They See Us by Ava DuVernay, that's a great one as well. But these are a bunch of different resources for you all. And then this last slide here is important, particularly for academia. So when we think about an anti-racist pedagogy and an approach to how to incorporate anti-racism on campuses and institutions and things like that, I don't have these in any particular order, but it's always important to not ignore race. It's important your students are aware of everything that's going on, and people, in your jobs and whatnot, everybody knows. But then also making sure that there is diversity, not just among the board, but also in your senior and your executive level administration, among your faculty and staff. And if there is not a concerted effort to make sure that there is diversity in the faculty and staff, then you're immediately doing a disservice to your students. That means getting hiring committees together. That means going the extra mile to seek out Black scholars, because representation matters to your students of color, especially your BIPOC students. In courses, think about the curriculum. Revise and reevaluate the curriculum. How can you center the experiences of BIPOC students within that curriculum and give them assignments that empower them and encourage them and allow self-reflection and pulls out the best in them? Again, that goes back to the approach that I told you about with TAPS. Sometimes as teachers, as professors, we have to change our tactics and our strategies to meet students where they are. Because I always look at it as if I have a student that is failing, then there is something intrinsically that I did not do correctly with that student. And so I always challenge myself. If I can't teach the way that they can learn, then I need to learn to teach so that they can learn. So there's a shift in how that takes place, and that's centering your students of color. When adopting textbooks, ensuring that there's diversity in those textbooks, in those assignments, in those videos, in those case studies that students are using and that they're growing and learning from. And then again, I put the link for the Harvard Implicit Association test on this PowerPoint, just in case anybody wanted to know exactly where you can go find it, because it all starts there. Understanding where you are on the spectrum is the first step in understanding how to move forward and deal with whatever implicit biases you may or may not have. And so that is my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. Oh, and that's my contact information.
Thank you so much, Chenelle. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Doesn't seem like we do. All righty. Well, thank you so much, Chenelle.
It looks like there's some in the chat. I'm trying to catch up here.
Oh, here we go. There is one of the, we got some.
And I think that someone was asking a question, but he was muted. So you probably need to unmute the group.
Oh, that probably would help.
I could see
Okay,
lips
now
moving.
Oh, I can hear everybody now.
I guess the thing that's hit me the hardest in my area in Toledo, Ohio, there was a really nice looking young man, black male, that was killed. He was a basketball player at a local school, and he was looking for scholarships and everything, had this whole world ahead of him. And it was black on black crime, which is it's horrible. Some of how these young gentlemen get involved in that. I don't know. It's terrible. That bothered me more than anything. He had such a future ahead of him. And I think they have to recognize that the community's got to come together. And it reminds me of I guess the 30s with the gangsters. You didn't dare turn on Al Capone, and you don't dare turn on your buddies in the hood, but you go out and you get even. And, oh boy.
So my dog was actually barking a little bit when you were responding, but I think I heard you say something in reference to black on black crime and addressing that issue. Is that what I got?
Yeah, that has, like I said, here in Toledo, we had a wonderful young man who's on the news and everything, and half the time we have one of these crimes, nobody will squeal on anybody. That seems to be the modus operandi, and that reminds me, like I say, of the 30s with the gangsters, and we had that issue here in Toledo back in the 30s too with the Lucavoli gang. Nobody would dare rat on them because they'd get their establishment blown up.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is, when I hear the black on black crime argument, it's a deflection. So the reality of the situation is most crime is intraracial, and you never hear somebody saying white on white crime, when in fact, white people kill other white people just as often as black people kill other black people, just as often as Hispanics kill other Hispanic people. And so, you can just go to the Bureau of Justice Statistics and look at the crime data. But what you see here, and probably what you were referring to, is what is reported in the media. Because that's the headline, and that's how you continue to perpetuate stereotypes and these blanket racist notions that black people are violent and criminal, when that's just not the case. And so, I wrote an article, and I did a really in-depth study on this, looking at media comparisons of crime. Hold on really quick. Looking at media comparisons of crime and how they are portrayed in the media. And when there is an African-American offender and a victim, either it's African-American or another, that's going to get reported versus where there is a white on white or other racial groups. And so, when we think about this, I always challenge people, especially when you listen to the news and when you watch it and you get these media representations, to look a little bit into it a little bit further and be a little bit more critical instead of just absorbing the information that is being pushed to you. That's where we get to starting to dismantle. That's how you start to become that domino. And so when I look at news media, and I always see, because I like to watch Channel 10, we have Channel 10 here in Columbus. So when I watch Channel 10 and I look at a news story, and I'll even look at how the headline reads, and I'll say, I wonder why they gave it that headline instead of person was shot. They say, black convict, or he had 2 previous offender, or convictions or something like that. That's how they lead with it versus saying what has necessarily actually happened. I think all of those are opportunities for people to be a domino, for people to challenge, for people to question and call into, why was this reported? There have been times actually when I've even called our news reporters and I said, well, this is not exactly how this happened. Why did you report it this way? Well, some news sells, some news gets viewers more than others does. If it bleeds, it leads, right? And so that's where it's important for all of us to be a little bit more critical in how we start to think about some of these issues. All right, I saw in the chat a couple people asking about TAPS. I put my email in there, and you can just send an email if you want to start a TAPS in a certain city, and we can have set up a meeting and we can get one started. Typically, we have a meeting with the police department, and then to see if they're even open to it, and that's usually we'll get our chief from Houston, and then we'll usually have director of public safety here for the city of Columbus, and we'll all come in and talk a little bit about it and how that works. For the city of Columbus, we are partnered with the juvenile court. They're the ones that actually fund it, so it's a lot of different players that are involved, but we can definitely make that happen. And then I see a book that I found helpful is called Bias by Jennifer Ephart. Oh, there's another book that's been put in the chat. So if anybody is interested in checking that out as well. And then I saw somebody say, how can alumni be involved in this work for WIT? I'm not entirely sure which work you meant, so.
Are you referring to the work around, and I'll use this phrase, diversity, equity, and inclusion?
It looks like it was a question that came from Andrew Steele.
Andrew. Well, I will just say this. Our president knows that we need significant work in this area, really for the entire campus. I don't make excuses. I will just tell you that, and you probably already know this, one, dealing with COVID right now. We had board meeting this week. I have been Zooming since Monday with the board. And I give kudos to Mike and to Casey Gale and just everyone, because they're really effective in the work that they're doing, around COVID. But you probably also know that as a university, we are facing some significant financial issues. But certainly I will keep talking with Mike. I know what he wants to do in terms of some very specific work on campus in this area. Right now, the funds aren't there.
A tough one, yeah.
But I will, when I was on the board from '89 to 2001, I developed the reputation that I was going to raise the issue around diversity and inclusion. And when I came back on the board in 2016, one of my fellow board members, said, you ask her to come back, so you know what you're going to get, because she's going to keep asking and pushing in this area. So I give you my commitment on that.
It's a great commitment to have.
You know
yeah.
me, Chenelle.
I do know you, and when you go hard, when you go for something, you go hard. So no, I think it's great, and I think there are several different opportunities, on Wittenberg's campus, to improve diversity and inclusion, and make sure you center the experiences of Black students there. But I do realize the reality of the situation, right? In higher education in general, most of your brick and mortar universities are facing some financial challenges, and so some decisions need to be made in terms of where people are spending money, where they're conserving and whatnot. But I always say diversity and inclusion is something that should not be shortchanged. And so I love that you've given it your commitment, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of the entire.
I will share, and I'm not going to be able to call her name right this moment, but I was part of the interviewing process. We have a new director of the Thomas, it was Judge Tom McLean, I think. We used to call it the Black House back in the day, but now it is a space that has many different groups, there. We just hired her from Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati. I was very, very, very impressed with her. But I will tell you, her focus is going to be with the students, which we think is where it needs to really be right now, and not that overarching to almost the entire university. We tried doing that with our last person, Joshua Moore, and it's just too much. So the priority is going to be with her working with the students, and we'll figure out how to do this other piece.
That's good. That's a good start.
Well, thank you so much, Chenelle, for taking the time today. What a wonderful presentation, so engaging, and you're just a wonderful presenter also. I think everybody agrees. Can we all give a virtual round of applause and thank you for doing this for us today. We will have a recording of this available, so if you want to rewatch, I know she gave some great action items. That chart towards the end was really informative as well, so we can kind of look back at that once we get it all uploaded.
Someone also asked in the chat room earlier, could we get a copy of all of these slides? Can they be sent to us?
It's going to cost you. So
come on.
I can get it to you. Rebecca, I'll send you a copy of it, and then hopefully you can.
I'll send it to everybody who is in here today. Absolutely. Happy.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. There we go. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see everybody in the toast this evening, and then in the other rooms tomorrow. So have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.